Welcome, everyone. Hi, Tim.
Hey, BA, how you doing?
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's been a good morning. Um, Feeling connected to you and the world. Yesterday, I had a nice swim at the local community pool, public pool, and then I went to a Palestinian rally and march in downtown and saw some new friends and Um, just got confirmation. There was a lot of people there. It was a good day. And it's over 1,000 people, and it was feeling like momentum. Um, so yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, that sounds like you had a really important day of participation and connection. I'm doing well too. I've been very focused. I feel like there's times of your life where you feel like um, oh, there's all these things that are forcing me to do things, and this is really oppressive. Or there's times where it's like I am so called to all the things that I'm doing that I can't help but be really focused into all these things. And I'm more of the latter than the former right now, and that's been good for me. Yeah, welcome everyone. We're going to be talking today about human rights. We want to talk today about Gaza, about better economic systems, and we want everybody who's here today to participate with us, to join us together in a learning experience. And so you're invited to join us. And Tim, uh, maybe we should take just a quick look at some of the different agreements that help us learn together. And by the way, I've been working on this list of possible things for agreements that's more comprehensive and thorough. I don't know if we want to take a peek at that today, but let's just start with what we usually look at here. I just want to bring us to our usual focus around this.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were you going to say, Tim?
Yeah, I think it's nice to have a frame of reference for folks showing up to participate in this safe and inclusive space of learning. That's what brings me here. I feel like our society, our country is full of vitriol and polarizing narratives, and this is like an oasis for me. Just being able to come here and know that I'm safe, even if what I might want to talk about could raise a lot of questions out on the street.
Yeah, I think a big part of what we're doing here is we're trying to make it so that we really can have these conversations. And very often we go into different spaces and people want to debate us when we're still asking questions and we're still trying to figure things out. And I feel like a big part of our work is not to say don't debate each other, because I love debating and I want people to debate me when I'm in the mood to be debated, but also sometimes we need to set ourselves up so that we're able to learn with each other and listen to each other and really hear each other's arguments. And so part of what we're talking about, do you want to read the first one out loud a little bit?
Sure, it's purposeful assumption number one: give every idea its fair hearing. And I love this one because it sounds like democracy. I don't
know. Yeah, well, and I think it's really critical. I really do, because sometimes we really don't listen to each other. And because of that, in our relationships, we know when that happens. We know when somebody's not listening to us. And so because somebody isn't hearing us, we keep repeating ourselves. and we never actually make progress, and we amplify our mutual assumptions that we'll never hear each other.
Totally. I feel like the key ingredient of a healthy conflict, as opposed to a high conflict where the participants get stuck in negative emotions and they get trapped and they can't get out, is listening. Is simply hearing fairly. I love your play on words. Like it's not just about listening, but it's really hearing, which kind of reminds me of the formality of a legal proceeding, where like it's documented and there's good hearing going on with professional listeners, theoretically, which might be a jury or the judge or somebody else.
Yeah, well, it's like if we don't listen to an idea at least one time as a group, how do we know that we're considering that alternative? In order, I was struck by in Mehdi Hassan's book, Win Every Argument. He talks about oh, hey, Semi sends us a heart. Thank you, Semi.
Hey, Semi.
Thanks so much. Glad to have you so glad to have you in the audience. Thank you.
So we could go off and get on a tangent. We could.
No, I'll finish my point very quickly. Let me finish my point quickly. Mehdi talks about Salman Rushdie having his book in his father's house. His father's a devout Muslim, and so the book is very blasphemous. And other devout Muslims would ask his father, "Why do you have this book here?" And he said, "Because I read it really carefully. I wanted to make sure that if I was going to disagree with him, that I understood all his arguments." I think there's a lot to that.
So knowing both sides of the debate,
and also, knowing both sides of the debate and being able to hold many ideas together in our mind at once. Go ahead.
Wow, that's a great idea. Great point. I mean, with any healthy system, it's complex and there's a lot of different interrelationships happening all at once. And here we are in our Western mind's tendency to abstract or pull things out of their context, and maybe just like one point that might not be the whole story or the whole truth. And something about democracy that I'd like to go back to from time to time is the plurality of having both stories being right simultaneously. Because, I mean, honestly, we bring so much different backgrounds and of ourselves, our experiences, our nurture and nature to every event. That means we all walk away from the same event that we just shared with different takeaways and with different kind of experiences in our minds. So we're kind of in relation with each other, but are we truly bringing our best selves to a conversation, to a debate, when we're not listening, when we're only bringing like what we want to say, as opposed to having to be a two-way exchange, maybe?
Yeah, well, and it's very easy if if one person's in control of the narrative to manage that, but if you have multiple people there, right, the chance for spontaneity breaks out. The chance for the very life force itself and chaos and ideas to be overturned. And there's a lot to that. And so
that's exactly
yeah.
That's exactly the definition of healthy conflict. What we're so missing in this country is having hard, difficult conversations in a kind of balanced and diverse and dense, complex ways.
As an educator, something that I keep talking about is how there's a sense that we want to kind of let go, and we have this chance to take a leap of faith in listening to each other. And it can be very scary sometimes, but then if we're really hearing each other and we're really tuning in with each other, we can relate more, as you were saying before, but we can also share a lot more and learn a lot more and challenge ourselves more.
Yeah, there's something important about having a sense that we're going somewhere in a debate, that both sides see the possibility of making healthy progress, some kind of positive direction.
Yeah, there has to be something. There has to be, and there's a modicum of breathing there. Now, speaking of now we're talking about the first point for a while, but let's talk about the second point, which is if you are speaking a while, we may interrupt. It's true. We're interrupting ourselves right now.
How might someone come and speak in this show? Could you maybe give us a link if anybody wants to come on and be part of this discussion?
Yeah, if you want to join, you're welcome to join us. Let us know in the chat, and we can coordinate that.
Also, the ticker at the bottom says starting soon, but
oh yeah, you know what? Let's.
We're about starting.
Yeah, I think we're ready to go. Thank you. So, yeah, and I guess one other point. What do you the last point again?
Yeah, this is my favorite. Make sure everyone gets home safely.
Yeah. All right. Make sure everyone gets home safely. When we do this work, we want to be able to do it in such a way that folks feel that they've left here whole, and we want to try to make sure that literally tonight everybody has a safe place to sleep. We shouldn't make plans that like only work for some people but don't work for other people.
Well, when it comes to the history of human rights, that seems to be easier said than done.
I think it's very challenging, and I think the reason why we've failed more recently is because people care more about it.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so one response is to say, well, the previous thing worked, so we're not gonna give those accommodations. We just have to make this work. But we've been watching that play out a lot, and what I've seen in my experience in organizing is you have to be able to listen to the needs of everybody in the group and relate to them. Otherwise, you're not going to have the kind of long-term buy-in that you'd need to really run a long-term campaign.
Totally, and you could scale that down to a one-on-one personal exchange or relationship, but you could also scale it up in terms of maybe innovating the world that we want to live in, because the old stories that we grew up in, that we need to unlearn, that are not working clearly. Clearly, they're not working now. That's what it's going to require. Like
it does require innovation, right? Like for instance, when I was involved in the White House climate emergency actions, what we did was we used the Vanguard method, which Jay is going to be talking about today. Jay wants to talk about that today. We used the Vanguard method. And so every time somebody in the group had a complaint, had a demand, had a thing they're interested in, had a need, I wrote down what they said, or somebody else wrote down what they said. We wrote down the time that it was at, and we tried to always figure out what mattered to that person. Like, what was the thing that the person was actually caring about? Like, what was for them, what made this a thing that it had gotten done in their mind. And we looked at like, were they mad, sad, upset, like what, and I think it allowed us to focus. And by the end, I was able to, because I was the lead support person, I was able to, at the end, actually come up with a list of all the things I had to do before I got on the airplane. If I was going to get on the airplane, I had all the things that I was going to do, and I could go down the list and I could say, okay, here's all the things we need to make sure of before I'm on the airplane, and we got them all done. And people were so happy. They were singing our praises, and this was in a space where people were inclined, after many weeks of hard work and living together and getting mad at each other, it would have been very easy for people to say, like, you don't care about us, if we weren't actually serious about it.
Yeah, and there's nothing better than being heard, especially when so much is on the line and you're caring so much. It's nice when that care and those skills of communication can be reciprocated.
It's important when people take action and they show how much they actually do care, and that, and that a lot of times, like, the things that they say you can't do in an organization are actually really cheap. And that's the ironic part about it, is like, a lot of times, like, there'll be little things people are asking for, little things, they keep asking for them, right, in different ways. And you say, oh no, we can't afford that, or that's frivolous, we're not going to do that. And it might actually be a really important quality of life factor for that one person. You don't understand why. And so you're actually running your system down by letting them continue to suffer. You're actually demoralizing the system consistently.
Well, I think the only way we're going to get home safely on this planet, at 8 billion of us, is with like a plan that is based on meeting everybody's needs fairly and safely. And safety includes fitting the economy within planetary boundaries. And there's just 9 of them. We have a plan, but I think the key is we need nested hierarchies of implementation of the plan at all levels. So local, state, national, global, international.
So I'm hearing from you, your point of view is that we find a way to organize a plan to make sure everyone gets home safely around the planet, that has a sense of the planetary boundaries. And maybe if we go deeper into this, let's explore the specifics of this, right? And maybe we should just right now, since we started into it, maybe we should explore the specifics of it now, and get into what that means specifically.
Well, okay, sure. Just real quick, but then I know we've got this great program, so I don't want to get too far off. But in general, planetary boundaries are just simply physical limits of Earth's carrying capacity that has both, it's a two-way street, both to provide goods or materials, literally, the materials of our everyday lives, of the economy, as well as to absorb. Earth also can and has been doing a great job, but it's kind of meeting physical limitations of absorbing our irresponsible pollutions in the form of air quality, or air pollution in the form of carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, but also water quality in our rivers that are affecting ecosystem health, that come back to haunt us in so many ways, but in soil health, because the way we treat the earth is the way we treat our bodies, right? Because it's so intimately related.
Let's pause it there, but let's keep exploring this. I think this is a topic that, like, we can get into really deeply, and we should. because there's a lot to that. But that's one of the things that we could be exploring today, even as a preview of reconnecting that to what we're going to be talking about later today. But okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, we are when we talk about human rights, because the thing that's intimately related when it comes to like any environmental topic is justice, social justice and human rights, because you can't have one without the other. Like I said, it has to be an innovating, everyone gets home safely, but emphasis on the everyone.
Yeah, very like everyone.
Yeah.
And so we have to think about that in the totality of the complexity. Now, one of the things you had mentioned wanting to talk about today is Noura Erakat's book, Justice for Some. And there was a section of the book that you'd asked me to share. Should we put that up on the stage now?
Yeah, maybe we could read a few, like a paragraph or something.
I think that would be great. Let's see here if we can stay over here on the side.
That's right.
How is this? Is this a good size for you?
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to read the whole paragraph and then we can pause maybe?
Sure, that sounds good.
Or do you want to find a good spot to pause and ask folks what they notice?
Yes, it's always I don't want to go too far without pausing. So
yeah, so whenever you feel is a good point to invite people to share. Anybody who's in the audience, feel free to share what you notice as we go through this.
Okay.
And I'll even share what I'm noticing too as I go through it.
Thanks. That sounds good. Content, international law is derivative of a colonial order. Doctrinally, the term international law refers to treaties, customs, and general principles that define the rights of states, regulate states' behavior towards one another, and establish states' duties and responsibilities towards organizations and individuals within their jurisdiction. The history of international law's development makes that law primarily a tool for powerful states. International law as it exists today began in Europe among states that were colonial powers. Positioned as universal in appeal and application, international law is the codification of exclusively European traditions. And I think that's a good place to stop, because the rest is like an example case from Spain in the 1500s, but we probably can notice it.
Yeah, we can pause there for a second. What are you noticing, Tim? What is everybody in the audience noticing? First, I guess. I've got some things that I've been noticing. What are folks noticing? Like, I just noticed that international law is that she's defining the scope of international law, that it refers to treaties, customs, and general principles which define the rights of states, regulate states' behavior towards one another, and establish states' duties and responsibilities towards organizations and individuals within their jurisdiction. So this is kind of like a scope of international law. I also notice here that doesn't include groups of people that don't have state sovereignty, despite having a lack of representation in what's done about their lives.
I see someone, Mac says,
"Oh,
international."
Hey, Mackenzie.
International law is the codification of exclusively European traditions. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, I think that's what kind of captured my attention, is this word derivative in the title, and the way she talks about like it's like this agreement that we were just talking about, the rules of engagement, so to speak, in this safe space that we're creating, how every idea gets a fair hearing and we get everybody home safely. Like those are like contractual terms that I guess is a kind of another way of saying law, contracts within society, within civil society. But then you have what she's talking about.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say, on the one hand, you have these agreements that we were just exploring just now, which are similar to international law. In what ways are they similar? In what ways are they not?
Thanks. Yeah, for clarifying. I think they would be similar in that they are some rules, some laws, but maybe you could contrast that with who wrote the rules and for whose benefit or whose purpose.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing from you that there are some rules, but you could contrast who wrote them for whose benefit. For you, that's a major difference. And by the way, I'm also seeing that Mackenzie a little bit ago mentioned European is considered, with quotation marks, universal.
Exactly.
And but we're saying who wrote the group agreements and for whose benefit is an interesting point, right? Because, and there's an interesting question, like if we're thinking about differences too, like I can think of some big differences, like for instance, group agreements in our case are very voluntary, right? People practice them voluntarily. And I guess if somebody was like, I'm not going to follow your stupid rules, and then they became a huge distraction for the group, we might say, okay, well, this is really hard. We'll try to talk to the person after the group, but this might not work out, whereas what's the enforceability of international law, or how does that play out if somebody violates international law?
So that's the key question, because what we're seeing in the news begs like to differ on the effectiveness of the international court system when you have these resolutions that are passed and they're supposed to be legally binding, but then you have people ignoring the judgment by the courts and continuing to do whatever it is they're doing. It makes you feel like there's two realities. One that some people have to live under this rule system, and one that other people are just doing what they want. Just doesn't seem fair or just.
Yeah. So I'm hearing, and we're actually kind of even exploring some of the book themes a little bit too. This notion that some people have these rules applied for them and others don't. Right? Like for instance, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, right, we organized an international coalition to push him out of Kuwait and prevent him from entering Saudi Arabia. And that was all done in the United Nations. But sometimes international law is being violated and nothing happens.
Or when Israel defense forces are for the last 15 years in a kind of violent apartheid, like two legal system arrangement are killing 7,000, above 7,000 Palestinians, and injuring over 150, maybe 170. I forget the exact statistics or data in the last 15 years. But then, you know, October 7th happens when Hamas comes and kills 1,200 or whatever. And all of a sudden, Israel's claiming the victimhood mantle and coming back with overwhelming force to put down that violent and abhorrent behavior. But now that, things are just kind of out of hand. But it seems like a double standard, I guess, is my point.
Yeah, right. There's, well, and it's like, it's interesting, right? So I'm hearing that there's a lot of injustice going on, and Israel gets treated differently than the Palestinians do in so many situations. And so there is this question of equality here that we've been exploring. Do we want to read the next section of this now and maybe add that to what we've been thinking about? So
let's keep going.
I'll read the next part. So as Spain, as folks are listening, feel free to share what you notice. As Spain encountered the indigenous societies of the Western Hemisphere, a Spanish theologian and jurist, Francis de Vitoria, articulated a body of law that made the rights of indigenous nations contingent on their society's resemblance to European society. After establishing and projecting Europe's particular norms as universal, Spain then used these norms to justify the plunder and conquest of indigenous peoples and their lands. The first seeds of international law were thus planted during a violent conquest to avoid that conquest, to afford that conquest a veneer of objective legality. So, what are folks noticing in this passage here? What was the point of view of Francis de Vitoria? What was his point of view?
Well, I'm just noticing he was a spiritual leader, a theologian, and a jurist. So he had his foot in both the legal world and the religion, religious or cultural backgrounds in Spain. And I guess he was using that to establish a set of rules of Europe's particular norms as universal, to read after you here, to justify being basically crimes against humanity. So somehow it was okay to plunder and take and kill people who were below the law for whatever reason.
Yeah. So there's this sense that the, like when she says, the first seeds of international law were thus planted during a violent conquest to afford that conquest a veneer of objective legality. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I feel like we could jump to an article from last week about the UN Security Council.
Let's jump in. I think this is a great moment to do that. And I'm also noticing Mackenzie saying, have we ever escaped this history of colonization? Where did it come from, and how do we escape it?
Exactly. That's why we're here, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So let's take a look at this is this was on the 25th of March.
Monday, yeah.
Yeah, right after last week. And do you want to read the beginning here? Do you want to just take the first paragraph and I'll take the second, or vice versa?
Sure, yeah. The United Nations Security Council demands an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian group Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and the release of all hostages as the United States abstains from the vote.
The remaining 14 council members voted in favor of the resolution, which proposed by the elected 10 members of the council. There was a round of applause in the council chamber after the vote on Monday. So what are folks noticing here in what's said in this article? Just the facts about this.
There was a vote about an immediate ceasefire.
Yeah. And it asks a release of all the hostages.
Yeah.
I noticed that the United States abstained from voting. What else do folks notice?
Do we know how many hostages are left on each side?
That'd be a good question, right? But yeah, right. Like they say here, right? It demands a release of all the hostages. I also noticed that there was a round of applause from the chamber after the vote on Monday. And I noticed that the thing they voted on was proposed by the elected 10 members of the council.
Yeah, so presumably it passed, and I guess that means that it can pass with a 10 vote record.
Right. Yeah, I like it's an interesting question to get into the
Must be having some.
No, I hit the back button tragically.
There you are.
I hit the back button tragically. A little bit of excitement for everybody in this moment.
Is everybody still here?
Yeah.
Cool.
But
you disappeared for a second.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a little bit more in this article that we could take a look at. What were we saying just as I flew out of the room?
About the vote and how many it takes to pass a resolution.
Yeah, like we could look at the formal rules. I noticed that we abstained and that it passed. And I also have noticed in the past that we have not abstained, that usually we veto and things don't pass.
Yeah, it's remarkable whenever the stars align and something passes, or something as contentious as this passes.
Yeah, and Eric Hott had pointed out that these are not insignificant. Like the reason why it's possible to sanction the West Bank right now is because the Security Council was able to vote that the West Bank settlements were illegal.
Well, that's exactly what happened in 2016, I think. Her introduction starts off with a reference to a UN Security Council vote where the U.S. also abstained, and so it passed. In other words, they chose to not get in the way of the rule of law being followed, and basically it was a resolution to condemn settlement in the occupied territories, and it passed, which is basically saying, okay, it's illegal for Israel to have developments in the West Bank. And then the introduction goes on to say that 3.5 months later, when by the rule of the Security Council, the Israeli member to the Security Council had to report on progress being made, and the report was their plans for more settlements on the West Bank, and the last thing she said was the only thing that the Security Council did was make a note of it, and they carried on as if everything was okay, even though they were flagrantly violating what was just voted on. And so this was like her foray into the contradictions between international justice in the court system and on the ground.
Yeah.
So here we are. It's been almost a week since they voted, and but I still recall seeing bombings and attacks during the week. So things are still going.
Well,
on.
and then and also also there's some new headlines now. Let me share from the Washington Post. This is just from the 29th. That already the Biden administration has authorized the transfer of 2,000 2,000-pound bombs and other weapons, even after they just got into a fight with the Netanyahu administration. So they're still sending weapons. And maybe we want to take a look at this a little bit too.
Yeah, who was fighting? I think Netanyahu was upset that the U.S. abstained, because if they would have voted, it probably would have been a no. And then, and then he would have been happy. But because the U.S. abstained, it passed, and now he's saying, what did he say? I mean, I guess in the article, do you remember?
Yeah. So there's a couple articles. Let me pull up. So there was also this article that Israel canceled the Washington meeting
right
after the ceasefire vote. But remember that this is happening. This article is actually happening before, and this article happens afterwards. So that's the 29th, and the other piece from the BBC was 5 days ago, when the vote happened. This was when the vote happened. So it's not oh, go ahead.
So Netanyahu was planning to come and speak to Biden administration in person, and maybe Congress.
Yeah, so let's just take a look here. Let's just take a quick look. Do you want to read, and we can just alternate paragraphs? They're so short.
Sure. Israel has canceled a meeting in Washington after the U.S. declined to veto a UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza.
The resolution, which also called for the release of all hostages, followed several failed attempts at similar measures since the October 7th attacks.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused the U.S. of having abandoned its previous policy.
Meanwhile, intense fighting rages between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The UN Security Council's first resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire came after urgent calls to avert a famine in Gaza. And maybe we want to explore these pieces too a little bit.
Yeah, I'm looking for a little hook into Netanyahu's response to the veto, or the fallout, the political fallout, where he said, "Okay, well, we're not going to come and talk anymore because we have our own ideas about how this fight should go," or something.
Yeah. So it says today's resolution gives Hamas hope that international pressure will force Israel to accept a ceasefire without the release of our hostages, thus harming both the war effort and the effort to release the hostages. Now, wait a second here. What do you notice there?
And this is Netanyahu's words or office statement?
Yeah, what do you notice there?
Well, basically, they're saying that their opinion is that today's resolution will favor Hamas, who hopes that international pressure will force Israel to stop the bombing, stop the attacks, without the release of hostages. So their argument is basically, we're not going to stop bombing until we get our hostages back. So for how many hostages are we down to now? 100 lives or 200 lives. They're going to keep bombing, which is up into the 30,000s or more.
Yeah, regardless of how many innocent hostages it kills in the process.
Right.
Despite what the families ask for, despite in fact, actually, so far we haven't taken a look at some of the C-SPAN clips. Do we want to play one of those? Rob had a clip about UNRWA, and maybe we want to talk about UNRWA for just a little bit too.
It's a good point. Yeah.
I see Maple sharing. Hi, y'all. Just tuned in, and that South Africa initiated international court said, "Uh-oh, watch for genocide ASAP" many weeks ago. Yeah, there's that too.
Hey, Maple. Welcome.
Well, yeah. So one of the members of our group who's been doing call-ins with us, Rob, we've been calling into C-SPAN every day. Let me share Rob's call-in.
And I like what Blinken says at the bottom line here on this article before we leave it.
Yeah, go ahead.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said publicly that a ground operation in Rafah risks killing more civilians and is not the way, in quotes, to defeat Hamas.
Yeah. Very, very, very interesting point, right? Because he says that, and yet what's being allowed?
It does seem to be lip service when we're still selling bombs. We, as in his administration or the U.S. government.
Yeah. Okay, so let me share this clip. Let me know if you can hear sound or not.
No, is this from Friday?
Yeah.
Great.
Let's talk to Rob.
Was sound okay there?
Yeah, I could hear him. Her. She said, "Let's talk to Rob."
Okay, great. Let me play.
And that's Mimi.
Forest Park, Illinois, Line for Democrats.
Good morning. I'm calling in about the situation in Israel and Palestine. And on the one hand, I want to sort of give a little bit of grace to all sides because I understand there's a lot of complicated history there. There was the horrible situation on October 7th, and I understand there's the goal of trying to keep everybody safe and I guess what I really struggle with though is why is it that I don't see what Israel's point is in trying to keep food from going from the UNRWA and all the other agencies that are trying to get food in. Why is the inspection process so cumbersome? A lot of that food is going to innocent civilians. I don't see how Hamas is going to be getting any of its hands of it. And Israel's really gone way too far with that, and it doesn't seem necessary. That's my comment for today.
Let's talk to Rich in.
Now that was a general. I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Oh no, that was Rob.
I mean, he's calling for general questions. There wasn't like a guest on who could respond to the question.
No, I think it was right after the special envoy to Yemen had been on. And so Rob to really point out how can we do this to UNRWA. Welcome, Jay.
Hello, y'all. How's
Welcome.
it going? Good to see y'all. I'm here. Yeah, y'all too. I'm coming here from Malcolm X Park here in DC. Yeah, good Easter, good Trans Day visibility to y'all.
Woo! Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, good to be here. Sorry I couldn't come earlier, but I'm sure y'all got into some good stuff.
Yeah, we were just talking about Rob's call into C-SPAN about UNRWA aid and the importance of that. I don't know if you heard any of it. Did anybody notice any details from it that stood out to you?
He kind of contextualizes his question with the complicated conflict, and he mentions the big offense of October 7th, but he said he doesn't understand why food is not allowed in. I don't know. It's a good question. I thought I've heard various answers, but it would have been nice if somebody was there from, I don't know, the Biden administration who could address that.
Yeah, well, it was the same show, right, that we had the special envoy to Yemen on the show. So we were just minutes away from possibly calling into him, depending on how things had been different, Yeah. And I'm
Did
seeing
y'all? Sorry.
Maple says,
yeah, go ahead.
Defiance present in each of us.
Defiance present in each of us. Thank you, Maple. Now, Jay, you came on here because you wanted to explore the Vanguard method a little bit today. So maybe we should wrap up exploring the Vanguard method now. Do you want to play some of that podcast?
Yeah, that could work. Yeah, if that feels right, I'd be excited about that. I feel like each time I've learned more about the Vanguard method, it's been a little bit more enlightening. So couldn't imagine much better places to do it than with y'all.
Before Tim, do we want to say anything more about UNRWA or anything before we wrap up on these issues? Is there more? Are there more puzzles we want to explore? I don't want to stop it as we're just getting started either.
I mean, we were just in this kind of trajectory from Nora Ericat's book, Justice for Some, looking at the legal system context and some of the patterns that we've noticed from last week, but also from 2016 vote around the illegal settlements in the West Bank, and now we've got the violent genocide in Gaza. So maybe where were we going with that? I mean, maybe the Vanguard method is the next natural step. I don't know.
Yeah, it's well, I do actually think there is a connection here, and we'd also said we'd talk about maybe the bridge is the UNRWA aid. So there was a piece. So Rob was talking about UNRWA. There's a piece in Foreign Policy magazine right now entitled "Don't Give Up on UNRWA."
Yes.
Good.
Good.
And maybe we can take a look at this and then use that as a way to pivot to the Vanguard method, because the piece we're going to be listening to is called "Demand is the Lever," and in the same sense, right? UNRWA is about supporting people, so is the Vanguard method. So I think that's a really good connection. Does someone want to read the title and the subheading?
I can give it a go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't give up on UNRWA. The agency, which goes to great lengths to remain neutral, is Palestinians' only hope. And this is from, I feel like it was Friday, maybe this came out. I don't see the date, but pretty sure. Or maybe you sent a link from yesterday. This is pretty latest.
What's that? Yeah, let's see.
Came from, I think this came out yesterday.
What's the publication?
March 29th, 2024.
Yeah, Friday. Okay. What's the publication? I forget.
Oh, Foreign Policy magazine.
Foreign Policy, right. You want me to keep reading?
Yeah, does somebody want to read maybe the opening paragraph a little bit? Yeah, go ahead.
Jay, go ahead.
Okay, I can. Maybe the birds in the park will help me a little bit as well. Last month, Felipe Lazzarini, the head of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, said that the agency had reached a breaking point, in quotes, after Israel accused 12 agency personnel of involvement in the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attacks. 18 states announced in January that they would suspend funding to UNRWA, including its top two donors, the United States and Germany. On Saturday, the U.S. Congress, the U.S. Congress barred funding to the agency through March 2025. Somebody else want to go?
What are we noticing so far as we're reading that much? Like, for instance, I noticed that the agency had said they're at a breaking point. What are you all noticing? And if you're in the audience, feel free to share what you're noticing too.
To give folks some background, there's, if we scroll down, there's a section on how UNRWA was originated as a makeshift solution, and then they became like a really important safety gap for providing basic needs for Palestinians in the absence of a formal statehood, like a legal sort of entity that could take care of people because they didn't have a state. And here they are, this virtual state that are about to disappear or evaporate when the funding runs out because of what they're talking about here in this article.
Yeah, do we want to read the next paragraph now a little? Take a look at that. I see Maple says, the undetermined now Palestinian segment of UNRWA, I think was the only entity that could get in. Probably. Yeah, Jay.
Yeah, I think, even from the headline, and I think I remember spaces where Foreign Policy magazine was actually an area we were disrupting. So I would also I guess what I'm noticing is in the headline, it says UNRWA's the only hope, and I like that they lay out how important it is and how, but also I think that, like, I don't know about only hope, because I think that liberation and true freedom for people that are living and suffering in Gaza right now, who knows what other things could emerge. That, yeah, this UN agency, I think, in my opinion, would be really important. But I guess I'm noticing a doubt within myself if this feels like a whole picture. But we also haven't read the whole article, so I don't want to be too.
I think it's a useful theory that you're working through right now, that when they say UNRWA is our only hope, is that only hope for what, right? Like, is that only hope for Palestine or only hope for short-term survival, depending on how that's meant? Maybe debate there or not, right?
Yeah,
like,
and I appreciate exactly. I appreciate the comment too, that, like, it very likely is the only channel, right? But yeah, I guess just some of my doubt in foreign policy. I think they're owned by The Economist, or I might be off about that, but it's kind of a side point.
And I think also, like, the point also is that, like, given that, like, they're such a mainstream publication, the fact that they're saying that says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we want to read a little bit more of this? Do we want to yeah, okay, we can read a little more.
Can you get down to where it started? Maybe another paragraph down.
Yeah, although Lazzarini is the next part.
In the interest of time, we might need to jump down to where it says UNRWA originated as a makeshift, because I think it really contextualizes.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. We could do
cutting them out of the picture. It's just like vital to. I mean, if bombs were not enough to undermine their only life support system, is just.
Yeah, let's read this paragraph here. Do you want to read it, or shall I?
Go for it.
UNRWA originated as a makeshift solution to a thorny problem. After the creation of the State of Israel in 1948 displaced around 750,000 Palestinians, the UN General Assembly passed two critical resolutions. The first, Resolution 194, enshrined Palestinian refugees' right to return to their homes and established the UN Conciliation Commission for Palestine to promote a durable solution for Palestinians. The following year, Resolution 302 set up UNRWA as a subsidiary organ of the UN General Assembly to conduct direct relief and works programs that would incentivize Palestinians to settle in neighboring countries. So what do you notice about that?
Well, something about a resolution to enshrine Palestinian rights to return to their homes.
Yeah. So it mentions the Palestinian right to return. And what else do you all notice? I notice they point out the creation of the State of Israel in 1948 displaced around 750,000 Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly, like, laying out that fact for the scale of it is really important. And then I guess, yeah, no, I mean, I think this is big, but again, the end of the paragraph kind of throws me off. And apologies if this isn't helpful, but, like, the last line I have issues with.
Yeah, say more about that.
I think, and maybe I shouldn't give somebody value judgments. It depends on what my role today is, I guess. But
no.
Okay.
Diversity of perspectives. So that's the whole
okay,
point.
Cool. Little provocateur maybe today, but
Go for it.
But in this sense, like at the end, saying UNRWA as a subsidiary organ of the UN General Assembly to conduct direct relief and works programs. That sounds great. but then that would incentivize Palestinians to settle in neighboring countries. I kind of can't help but think like, okay, well, here's an incentive for you to leave your land. And why is that, so infused? So I'm wondering if that's their kind of characterization of it, or that's like literally what UNRWA's, some of its purpose was,
So I literally just like what I was able to do is I was able to pull up the General Assembly Resolution 302, and from UNRWA and the United Nations. And so, do you want to just? I know this is not how we set out to do this, but maybe maybe we should just read this, But I'm hearing from you, Jay, point out a real concern here that it's incentivizing Palestinians to give up their right of return, even though it promises them one, even though it theoretically promises them one, that perhaps it's undermining their right of return as well.
Yeah, it seems kind of two-sided in a sense, and yeah, a lot of questions.
Should we just start from here on read the points together real quick and see if we see any of those points here?
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe what if we did it real fast, where Tim, you read one, then Jay, you read the next one, then I read the next one, and we go through the list of them as fast as we can. And then if people are in the audience, you can say in the chat what you notice. But what if we just read all these? There's like 22 of them.
Well, how are we doing on time?
So we could stay a little bit longer, and then just after this section, we could go for the Vanguard method stuff, or we could explore Jay's point, or we could back off. I'm glad to do either.
I think.
Yeah,
Tim. No, Tim. I'm curious what you think.
I think you're spot on, Jay, because the next paragraph talks about the contradictions of these first and second resolutions right after 750,000 people were displaced. So I feel like you're going in a really good place, and the point of that was to basically say, I think a few paragraphs down, that like the Palestinians, they said the only acceptable solution was to return, and that was unacceptable to Israel.
Yeah,
so you just end up with this temporary solution becoming the compromise and the best sort of way forward.
I would be just careful about that, because I don't know that the Palestinians returning was unacceptable to Israel as a whole, right? Because there were Israeli peace activists at the time, and a lot of people who had been involved in early Israel weren't actually interested in a Jewish state. They were just Jewish. And so when things went underway, people got lumped in with Israel.
Gotcha.
So I think it's just worth it. I know that's like being super nitpicky, but I do think it's worth it to point that out, right? That not every person who became an Israeli who was Jewish saw a only Jewish state as the future. In fact, I think a lot of people didn't see it that way, but certainly people like David Ben-Gurion did.
Right. So you've got the state policy and what the United Nations General Assembly is willing to encourage or support these differing approaches. I think this article is trying to point out that it reflects a deadlock in the diplomatic options available.
Well, and I think the one thing that I feels tied here is that, like, with the people's democratic participation in these policies, in these negotiations, and like codifications of even if it's just a resolution, like, I think, did that actually come from representative public opinion from within Israel, from within Palestine? whether they, both want, they both like an opportunity to leave and to stay. And so like if those things were informed, but I think it's a big question of how democratically it was arrived at.
Well, yeah, and there's definitely a lot of politics. Like so I think we're at a place where we could explore what the politics are of it, what would all be the complexity of it. I don't sense that there's a will in this group to explore that today, which is okay. We should accept that and keep flowing.
Maybe, can you put a
move into
link?
the Vanguard method work maybe a little bit.
Yeah,
Good.
because the Vanguard method is almost like the like a real solution, like headed towards meeting a plurality of opinions and desires. That sounds a lot like democracy to me, but I could be wrong.
And no, I agree, Tim. And I mean the practice of it, I think, and we've been seeing this in the field, and whether activism in other ways, that if somebody's asking me ways to decolonize, I think Vanguard method is pretty high on the list. And I think it's a natural tie-in, because I think if we have demand and people's care and insight infused into it, then geez, we can, I think there's some of these methods to infuse, have respect for democracy.
Let's take a look at that then. And maybe, could you?
Yeah, this is from.
Maybe put a link to that foreign policy. What was it? We were just looking at that.
Let me share that link. And also, Maple referred to non-solutions as well.
Double talk. Yeah.
So here's the foreign policy, and here's the Vanguard method. There's a sign up on there that's free, but they used to just put these out there, but now there's a little sign up. So and so we'll play a little bit of this, and as we go through this, I just want folks to share what you notice, and just put that out there. So here we go. Let me know if you can hear this okay.
Demand is the lever. A very short tutorial. Now, this tutorial applies to transactional services. These are services that begin with demands from customers, like, can I buy something? Can I have a service? Could you fix a problem? And so on. Now, the principles can also apply to services where transactions are begun by the service provider, like outbound sales, but I'm only going to talk about those that begin with customers, and most services are like that. Before I describe how powerful a lever it is, consider how management is taught to think about customer demand. Well, it's treated as a given. We estimate volumes of demand based on prior volumes, and all demand is treated as work to be done. In call centers, for example, demand volumes can often be accurately predicted by time of day or day of week or even season, and that might make us feel in control. But what are we missing if we think like that?
And let's just take a moment. What are you noticing so far in what John is saying here?
He said something begins with customer demand. What was that?
Yeah, he says demand is the lever. And then he talks about, I noticed he talked about conventional notions of looking at demand, like looking at the volume of demand and knowing that, like, in the morning you might get a lot of calls and in the afternoon you might have a different amount of calls, right? Like, he talks about that. And I heard him say that makes us feel in control. But then he asks a question here. Let me see if we can pull that question back up. I forgot what the question was. Let me pull it back a little bit.
Powerful a lever it is. Consider how management is taught to think about this, and most services are like that. Before I describe how powerful a lever it is, consider how management is taught to think about customer demand. Well, it's treated as a given. We estimate volumes of demand based on prior volumes, and all demand is treated as work to be done. In call centres, for example, demand volumes can often be accurately predicted by time of day of week, or even season, and that might make us feel in control. But what are we missing if we think like that?
Yeah, and then he asked this question, what are we missing? Like, it might make us feel like we're in control, but what are we missing if we think like that?
What a good question. What are we thinking? What are we missing if we think like that?
Yeah.
Oh, how about who should be in control, right? Isn't the customer supposed to be right?
Well, it's an interesting where like what's useful who should be in control, or what is useful control? What's effective control in the situation?
Hmm. And if the lead up to the question too is like, we can make us feel like we're in control, I think the question feels pretty directly connected to it. So yeah, I know I've been studying a decent amount of Vanguard methods, so I think there's a little like not much, but like a little like knowledge about like even what he's trying to get to with control, I think. But yeah, there's so much in this. Like I think even the nature of service and who customers are. I think because we've learned it relates to activism. So anyway, I don't want to throw in too much, but yeah, the question itself, like if we think like that, what do we miss? I don't know. I'm still brewing on it.
Yeah. Should we play? Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I noticed the emphasis was on quantity in terms of conventional notions about demand, and quantity is always, there's a tension between quantity and quality. And so I'm just wondering if that's where he's going next. Is like, that's one way to look at it, and so I'm just waiting.
All right, well,
Yeah.
let's find out, shall we?
Well, and one other thing too, I think that is what Tim, I think that's true because of like the pointing, because he also mentions, is this John, by the way?
Yeah, that's John.
John Seddon, yeah. I love his cadence too. But I think with the quantity aspect, he points to, we know what's happened before. We know what's happened with prior quarters, prior times. But is that, I think he's kind of framing that in a little bit of speculation, maybe too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, check.
Yeah, let's play a little bit more and let's see.
In drug treatment services, for example, we predict volumes of programs required from historical provision. But what does this tell us about the efficacy of the programs? While it may be conventional to think of all demand as work to be done, this is to ignore the nature of demand. That's a fundamental error. How many calls to the call center are because customers have failed to get what they want? How many people are sent on drug treatment programs that haven't previously worked for them? So the way to think about demand is to think of it as having two basic types: value demand and failure demand. Now, value demand is the reason any service exists. It represents the things customers or citizens want or need from the service. Failure demand is defined as demand caused by a failure to do something or do something right for the customer. So here's the thing. All command and control service organizations experience high levels of failure demand. All of them. By command and control, I don't mean bosses being bossy. I mean how the organizations are designed and managed. Front and back offices, activity management, specialization, standardization, inspection, and so on.
So what are we noticing now? What else have we noticed since the last?
Yeah, and I'm curious too from the chat and Facebook. Anybody, any questions? Any things y'all notice? Because I think there's so much here. I love his confidence. I love he says, you know, you can tell he's been through a lot, saying this is what demand's about.
Yeah, I noticed that he talked about failure demand and value demand. Did you notice anything about those concepts? Failure demand and value demand?
Value demand, I heard him say, represents what the customers need. And then failure demand is like what they're not getting or what's not working in the process of serving the customer's needs.
Yeah, and he said that most conventional command and control organizations have high levels of failure demand.
Yeah, I mean it made me. I'm still sitting with this notion of control and like the feeling, maybe it's a goal, maybe it's a feeling of something that is necessary to have in the workplace, and that's like, do I have this under control? Like, do I, like, am I if I, especially as from a boss level, perceive like they need to have some form of control for things to be running well? It just feels like a burden, kind of, because if you really just dove into the work and knew what support systems are needed for the work to flow and ask your people what they need, then I don't think you need control. I think you'd have, so yeah, I think that with the demands, how those connect to it, if you care about the demands, maybe you can not have to approach it that way,
Yeah.
So I'm hearing that, like,
Bye, Maple.
what's that?
Maple's got to go.
Yes, by Maple. Yeah, by customer here, we mean, like, if you're an activist organization, the people that are actually there to change human rights policy, or if it's a social work program, it's the people who need help, right? Like if you're running a school, it's the learners. But yeah, have a great day, Maple. And so Jay, to what you're saying about control, and I see Maple says, "Oh, smiley face." Okay, that, like, a lot of conventional organizations are obsessed with controlling things and micromanaging them, and it creates this whole bureaucracy in organizations. And there's an interesting question of, does it even work? Does it even make anything any better? And one thing that John Seddon says, as a leader, you may be in an organization and sometimes you may have to be bossy, but the point is not that you have to be bossy. The point is that you have this process whereby everybody's working together to design the process together, using intelligent information about the people you're helping, using that to make decisions as a core decision-making process. So then if you're a leader in the organization, you're carrying out the ideas of the people on the front lines that you've worked on with them. And so if you're being bossy, you're being bossy on behalf of something that the group actually thinks matters. And so it's not having power over people, it's sharing power with people.
Wow, that was beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah.
Do you want to, are there any puzzles that are coming up for folks about what you've heard so far? Do you want to play a little bit more and share what we noticed?
We didn't go through it all the way.
Not all. We're about halfway through now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'll save like kind of a wider commentary, just how like something like systems thinking, and of which the Vanguard method is. It's just so interesting that the little echo. the ways of its contrast to our default ways of being. But I think that's a wide, pretty generalized conversation. So maybe the meta piece we could fold into the end or another session. But I just think that so much with this is it's both feels complex and simple. I think because of a lot of factors in my journey with it, with the Vanguard method so far. So yeah, anyway, I'll pause there.
No, thank you, Jay. Like, I mean, it is complex and simple at once, right? Like, and that would be an interesting point to explore of what about it is complex and what about it is simple. There's a lot in what you're saying, and maybe we can come back to it in a second, play a little bit more, and then come back to it. Do we want to do that, or do we want? Okay, cool. Let's do that.
If those are the features of your organization, you'll have buckets of failure demand hitting the system. If, say, it is running at 80% of all demand, as it often does, imagine, what is that telling us? Well, obviously, by definition, there's something we didn't do or didn't do right from the customer's point of view. We'd be right to think this must have a negative impact on our customers' views of us. But also, what is it doing to our capacity, the number of things we can do? Well, it can only be robbing the system of capacity. And what do you suppose is happening to costs? So what is the big lever? The eradication of failure demand, obviously. Now, many managers think you can't manage anything without measuring it. So it follows that they first want to measure it. Then the failure demand can be reported, blame can be allocated, projects can be assigned. And yeah, I've seen this plenty of times, and it goes nowhere. No project can change the management system. Failure demand is nothing more than a signal. It points to the services that are failing. Remember the definition. All you need to be satisfied of is that the failures being identified can be linked to a major type of customer demand, and then the work starts.
So we're not quite done yet, but we're now 3/4 of the way through. What are you noticing now?
I'm hearing that failure is when the customer didn't get their demands met. It shows up as like a recurring problem.
Yeah. Like for instance, like the Palestinian people, like what are some things the Palestinian people have asked for historically that have been ignored?
Like returning home safely.
Returning home safely. Yeah.
And even just like a stable supply of clean water, maybe.
A stable supply of clean water, right? Like, and we can see that as like these needs are unmet, things get more and more chaotic, right? Like there was a period, when I was a child still, where the Palestinians had just done the nonviolent intifada, the first intifada, which was nonviolent. People will try to complain about kids throwing rocks occasionally. That happened a couple of times where a kid threw a rock, but it was very nonviolent, and so they were making a request then. And then we've seen since the Oslo Accords, even though promises have been made, nothing has been done. And so the question keeps getting asked over and over and over again in more and more serious ways. Like I think that in many ways it connects to the notion of no justice, no peace. No value demand. You get failure demand, no peace. Failure demand is peace.
Wow. Wait, what that last part again? But
failure demand relates to no peace,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
when you have failure demand, like literally, like most police forces, I think I heard that most police forces operate at something like 80% failure demand. 80% of what the police force is doing is responding to stuff that they did poorly in the first place, that people were left with unmet needs.
We could talk about the criminal justice system, but that would be like a major tangent. But
Yeah,
totally,
but so
like bail reform.
oh, right, yes. So we could keep diving into that, but what John was saying was going back. Do we want to play the last bit of this, or go back a little bit and play the rest of it, maybe, and then see what we notice?
Just real quick. I'd like to throw a question to y'all and to the audience. Very curious to hear if y'all noticed how saucy John is being sometimes in the
Yes.
he goes, obviously, and then what was that last part we just heard? That it was like it's just so good. I love it.
Yeah, no, and John will very often, he's so mild mannered 3/4 of the time, and then he'll quote somebody like David Graeber and be like bullshit jobs, or like every once in a while he'll use a curse word, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting. He was originally a prison psychologist. That's what brought him into this work, was being a prison psychologist and helping people as a young 20-something-year-old graduating from college, trying to help hardened criminals get out of crime, and then being told, wouldn't it be easier if you changed the system that made prisons? And that's why
Wow.
work. That's literally why the Vanguard method is so important, is because we're literally asking the question of like, what makes prisons? What makes all this, all these systems that destroy people?
Well, it's like that adage of, at some point, instead of just pulling drowning people out of the river, you should go upstream to see why they're falling in the river in the first place. And wow, that's beautiful. And maybe we could and some of that realness makes sense if you spend that much time in prisons where such injustice is. Yeah, maybe we could go back like 20 seconds and then listen to some more.
Yeah, I'll roll it back even. I rolled it back a time, but I'll throw it back a little bit farther. Let's play it now.
Blame can be allocated, projects can be assigned, and yeah, I've seen this plenty of times, and it goes nowhere. No project can change the management system. Failure demand is nothing more than a signal. It points to the services that are failing. Remember the definition. All you need to be satisfied of is that the failures being identified can be linked to a major type of customer demand, and then the work starts. The way to eradicate failure demand is, quite simply, to design services that work. That's the big lever. So that requires thorough knowledge of value demands, expressing value in customer terms. That knowledge is used to design the expertise required at the point of transaction in order to absorb the variety of customer demand. And that's it. As you get cracking, you'll see failure demand drop like a stone. As you continue to improve, you'll eradicate most of it. Knowledge of demand is the key. Failure demand is the signal. Designing effective responses to value demand is the big lever. Simples. Now, this may have left you with some questions or thoughts, and if you email me with those, should you feel that you want to, I guarantee that I'll respond. Bye for now.
So good. There's so much in that, and that was one of the ones I was remembering when we first were listening. That remember the definition of failure. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, it's very precise. Go ahead, Tim.
it reminds me of how we were describing our rules of engagement at the beginning of the show, and how, like, just in these 3 lines of every idea being heard, like really, really listened to, or a fair hearing for each idea, is sort of embedded in the Vanguard method, and how everybody gets home safely. Those 2, I think, points are what could allow us to get to real solutions in all of the conflicts that in our lives that have become so unhealthy, because we're not good listeners, because we get entrenched in negative emotions, and we get polarized, and we sort of refuse to do any more listening. And so we need to bring in angry hands and bombs, rather than just having productive, grown-up conversations.
Like,
So
yeah.
I think the Vanguard method is like a path to peace,
Yeah.
or could be.
Yeah, and it's an intervention strategy too.
Yeah.
So a big part of it is looking at these organizations, these industrial complexes, these service industrial complexes, and saying, holy crap, like 60 to 80% of what's happening in these organizations that you spend time responding to, you're spending 60, 80% of your response time responding to stuff that's because you responded so poorly in the first place. And like, this is why, Tim, I think this is so critical for like linking this up with the degrowth movement, because like, if you think about it, there's huge amounts in our gross domestic product of wealth that is just sitting there in our service organizations, that if we actually dealt with all of our failure demand across the nation and focused on value demand, what kind of economic boom would that create in our economy without adding any more fossil fuel, without adding any more oppression, with good paying jobs that people can stay in for the rest of their lives if they choose to. And I think that's why when I was on C-SPAN the first time with this group, that's why I called in about Vanguard method, for that exact reason. And I'm going to keep calling in about it.
I think we should.
Absolutely.
I've heard that the economy, I'm not sure if it's the U.S. economy or the global economy. I think it's global, because it's Hickel, and he basically said the current system of capitalism is 60% inefficient. I mean, that's mostly inefficient. That's like, if we just solved our inefficiencies, we could reduce carbon emission, greenhouse gas emissions by 60%, because the economy is linked to material throughput in values and goods and services in the economy, is measured by GDP, and that is directly linked to energy use, and that's directly linked to greenhouse gas emissions and climate heating, global warming. So this is like the most important thing that we could be sort of using, getting better at, getting to be better listeners, solving the inefficiencies in our communications and our conflicts, but also in our whole economies.
Bam. Yeah. I
Well,
think it is. Exactly. I think it is that point. It is a method. It's a lever. It's a level of care. We talk about a peace economy, a care economy. Like, there's a lot of pathways, I think, how to approach it with the Vanguard method. And maybe we'll save this for a follow-up, because I think that the Vanguard method I've been finding in a really short way, just like literally centering this instead of, say, centering profit or revenue or some other metric of success that certain folks would like to see, valuing what is really important from everyone in the system's perspective. Like, it's just, is so amazing. And I hope we can do another. We've been talking about watch parties as well, doing like those videos, because this is just audio. Even there's a lot of
Yeah.
amazing resources on their videos that are educationally just so nice.
Yeah, this Vanguard. I'll very briefly. They have a whole e-learning section here, and I just want to share this very quickly, and we'll wrap up. But the e-learning section here, this is there's free content here which anybody can just check out, and then there's also paid content as well that folks can learn the in and outs of the Vanguard method. It's really powerful stuff. I've learned a ton from this, and we use it in the group ourselves. So that's something that we're going to continue to explore in this group. And if you actually want to practice doing the Vanguard method with us, you can do it with us. We are taking down demand analysis, and you can practice it with us. So come here and do some with us. Like, it's great talking about it, but we want to actually get ahead on this and harness our capability as an institution and have really strong responses that like give us all that time back that we're losing. So we've done some of that, and we're going to keep deepening that work. As we wrap up here, I just want to say to folks, Code Whatever is a 501c3. And what we do here is, we do this, a lot of this is volunteer. We only have one paid staff member. And so if you feel inspired here, feel free to donate to us. We have a GoFundMe. If you're following us on Twitch, you can see on Twitch, you can watch some videos and testimonials. So thanks so much for everyone coming out today. Thank you for joining us here on Easter and Trans Visibility Day. A post from me will be forthcoming later today. And what else, folks? Any last thoughts from the two of you?
Yeah, I think, and just to show, like appreciation, I was trying to open Twitch on my phone because I think the fact that Vanguard method and its interconnectedness that we've been speaking on, the fact that Code Whatever, the space is doing it so intentionally and pushing it out there. It's a big part. I was trying to get on Twitch just now, but I'm on my phone. But I'm going to donate $250 to Code Whatever to support exactly work like this, because it's it's insanely pointed at, as I think we've made a strong case for it, that it continues to be a way, literally a way to help un-F the world, to decolonize this stuff,
Yes. It truly, and it does it, it does it in the most loving possible way, and with in a way that potentially opens up a situation where people who are currently being oppressive can get de-escalate from that, out of that situation, into something that's anti-oppressive.
Right. It becomes a question of better communication in human rights. And if we can get this right, if we can build the foundation of a just society from just better communication, I feel like we would not need the legal system that tries to resolve the conflicts, because we would have less conflicts, or we would have better conflict resolution built into society to sort of build a real, true democratic system from the ground up. Sounds like a lot of work.
No, there's something deeply profound in that, right? Like the great systems thinker Dr. Russell Ackoff used to talk about the difference between hierarchy and lowerarchy. That, like, if you try to use the international law system, you're using the hierarchy to try to like top down make it happen. And so if you're using lowerarchy, what you're doing, and that's what we are as we're starting this policy institute as a nonprofit, right? And this policy institute that we've been developing here is lowerarchical, right? Like, we want to make sure that the working people approve it, not the people at the top tell the working people to approve it. And so
Yeah.
what's
And
profound, I think, oh yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no, I just think that exactly the level of communication, Tim, as you speak to, that I think like is approached in such a strong way when you value listening as important as sharing. Like they're obviously inextricably linked. Like, yeah, that infusing that into our dialogue or interactions, I think it's super powerful. And
when the conflict is about a topic that someone feels passionately about, the key to maintaining that healthy flow of communication is self-regulation. If we can maintain our healthy powers of self-control in the conversation, I feel like we can provide the conditions for successful coming together over hard, several ways of resolving the conflict. We need to stay on the same page. We cannot afford to be polarized into our own sort of silos. We have to kind of keep everybody back. We have to pull everybody back in the middle. And I feel like this has the power to do that. Yeah, it's very affordable and repeatable and inclusive and kind. I'm very hopeful about where we're going with this.
Woo. Let's go.
Go.
How's it
Happy
going?
Sunday, everyone. Yeah. Happy Sunday.
Thank you for holding the space as usual. Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me in this space on a holiday, on Trans Visibility Day, hanging out here with all the chaos, and we just made this happen. We didn't even think about it that much. I mean, amazing.
Yes, and hopefully my audio hasn't been too loud. I think maybe y'all can hear the. Okay, cool. The drum circle, the Malcolm X drum circle is just starting too. So
that really, we saw your picnickers over there. People were throwing down the blanket, giving me ideas about the rest of my day, how I wanted to go. So thank you.
It's beautiful. Absolutely. Happy spring, y'all. See you soon.
Happy spring. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was such a beautiful day. We're always really glad to have everybody here and learn together. So I'm BA, and I'm here with Tim and Jay, and we'll be back next week talking about human rights. We'll also be back on tomorrow night with Mackenzie.
We've got book club next week too, and that's Monday.
Yeah, well, next Monday we'll have the book club, and there's going to be computer coding classes throughout the week. Tuesday night there's going to be a live stream coding, and on Thursday there'll be a Zoom session that you can drop in and ask coding questions. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for keeping the light on here on Sunday.
Absolutely. Yes. Remember, demand is a lever.
Demand is the lever. Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Peace.
Peace. Have a great weekend. Happy holidays.